for those tuning in, I'm Julia. I am the company media manager here at Opera Santa Barbara. And today I have a very special guest that I get to talk to. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to meet with the amazing composer Laura Kaminsky, known for her powerful social conscious music, including the acclaimed opera As One, as Opera Santa Barbara fans know. So today we get to talk about her newest work, Time to Act, that I got to go see the workshop to in Pittsburgh. And I'm just excited to get to talk to you today. Laura, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to see you again, Julia. And I'm actually really great because I just finished the score and sent it in about 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh. Oh, congratulations. That's so
Yes,
exciting.
the workshop in Pittsburgh led to the conclusion of the piece and making some of the changes that we decided needed to be made after we lived with the piece with real singers.
Mhm.
And first draft is sent off. Now I'm working on the orchestral score and we'll deliver those parts for the workshop with the instruments and the singers in about a month.
Oh my gosh. It must be so cool like seeing something you've worked so hard on just get to come to life like that and see all the pieces come together. That's what I thought was so cool about the workshop in Pittsburgh is just seeing every piece kind of come together. And I'm sure, as time goes on and it gets closer to when it's going to premiere, it's so cool to see. So that's so exciting. Congratulations. For those who don't know you, if you want to give us just a little bit of background of who you are, how you started, what inspired you to, come into this world of composing and opera and all that fun stuff.
Sure. So I'm a native New Yorker, first generation American. Grew up in New York City and went to the public schools, including I had the very fortunate experience of going to an arts high school, the High School of Music and Art. And so I've been immersed in the arts in general and music most focused since I was a little kid. Um, and I started making up music when I was really young before I could read anything or play an instrument. And so I asked my parents for piano lessons. And that's when I began to study. And I kind of never had as much fun practicing the Mozart or the Beethoven as I did making up my own music. So, so I never got really great at playing the piano, but I used it as a tool to help me figure out how to write down things that I was imagining. So I've been writing music for a really, really long time. Um, and you mentioned that I sort of have, sort of social political activism in threaded in much of my work. I've come to opera later in life. I mostly spent the earlier part of my life writing chamber music, the smaller ensemble configurations, and the intimacy of that was really powerful to me. And even though that music didn't ever have words attached to it, I mean, occasionally I'd write vocal chamber pieces, but all much of those, string quartets and piano pieces and trios and all of those pieces have some underlying concept about being a human being and the world in which we live, which is expressed through musical energy, but not with text. And then I sort of found myself in this world of opera when I decided I needed to write what is now As One, which I was fortunate to have a production in Santa Barbara, although I had COVID then and I couldn't come at the last
Oh,
minute. So I was really sad about that, but I heard it was production. Um, but As One actually was not really conceived of as a political piece. It was much more, I was a psychology major in college, not a
mhm.
music major. And I've always wrestled with the questions of what is yourself and how do you find and live your authentic self? And As One is essentially that question told through the story of a trans person who realizes that they've got to reconcile themselves with themselves and then in the world in which they live. And it hit a chord because it's actually a very universal story. Everybody has to, at some point, say, who am I and how do I live my authentic self? And so that launched me into the world of opera. And as one has blessedly had this an amazing life, I wrote it with Kimberly Reed, who's a trans documentary filmmaker and now librettist, and Mark Campbell, who's a well-regarded librettist. And they created the story. And we went on and did some additional works together. And now I'm sort of spending a fair amount of time in the world of opera, although I just finished a string quartet score for PBS Poetry in America episode
Oh,
that will be
wow.
next spring. So, I mean, I just finished another string quartet that deals with my concerns about the environment called Arboreal, pertaining to trees. So I just kind of jump around doing a lot of different things, and Time to Act, I think, is my ninth opera.
Wow, that's incredible.
So
Amazing. Well, what's like your process at the, like the beginning of, like constructing something like an opera or a string quartet? Like what is your kind of beginning process to finding what like avenue you want to go down or what, how you want it to sound or the final product to be?
I mean, every single piece has its own birth. You
Hmm.
know, one has every piece sort of has a different prenatal process and then birthing process and then parenting process. Some pieces I just need to write them and I just go and do it. Some of them are the result of a collaboration or a commission where there's a task at hand. In the case of operas, several of the works I've done, I generated the idea for the story, even though I didn't write the story. Although in one case I co-wrote a libretto with the novelist, but I was invited to set this novel. It wasn't that I knew the novel and proposed it. The company came to me and said, "We'd like you to read this novel. And if it clicks, we'd like you to meet the novelist." And it clicked, and we wrote the libretto together. But in the case of this particular piece, Time to Act, I was approached by Kostis Protopopoulos, who is the director of Opera Santa Barbara. He had a desire, and this is how, and I may not recollect all the details exactly right, because we all have our different places that we hold memory, but I didn't know him. I did find out that Opera Santa Barbara was going to do as one, but he reached out to me and said that for a long time, he's Greek, that
Hmm.
felt that there was a lack of knowledge of the great Greek myths and the great Greek history that's the basis of so much Western civilization. And he wanted to find an interesting and innovative way to make that part of contemporary opera telling. And there was, and I don't know if I'm remembering all the history properly, but he was working with Crystal Manich, who's a fantastic stage director. And they started talking, and there was a notion of using the story of Antigone to make people familiar with that story, but also to shed it, to position it in a contemporary context so that it would resonate with opera goers and young people. So I don't know, and this is a question for Crystal and Kostis, how it came to be the story of Time to Act, but the conceit was a high school drama club is putting on a production of Antigone and are not completely connecting with it because it's like that's old stuff and that's not my language and why are we doing this anyway? But it was their project, so they were doing it, and this new girl joins their club midway into the process as they're auditioning and starting to figure out the show. And she's kind of weird and a little bit distant. And over time, it's revealed that her brother was a shooter in a school incident and then killed himself. And she and her family left and came to this new community. And she was told to join the drama club. And of course, Antigone deals with the story of two brothers at war. Antigone is their sister. One brother's army kills the other, and the remaining brother says, "Don't bury our brother. He's an enemy." And Antigone says, "But he's my brother, and I still love him." And that's really what plays out in a contemporary setting. because some of the kids in this drama club don't want to deal with this new girl. And they're like, well, if your brother was like that, you must be crazy too. We don't want to have anything to do with it. Or you're actually guilty because you didn't know that he was messed up and didn't protect him. And some were sympathetic, like, oh my God, the suffering you must live through. So it sheds a lot of perspective on these issues, but it's really a plea against anti, it's anti-gun violence, or, to try to stop this absolute, flooding of our culture, of our society with guns and the easy access that exists. Although that we don't talk about it politically, it's not a agit-prop political piece. It's really a human piece about loss and anger and fear and judgment. And so these kids come together and they have to battle it out. So Costis approached me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it at first. It's a pretty heavy subject. But after I met with Crystal, we agreed that we kind of liked the way each other's minds worked, that we could become a team. But I knew that I wanted to bring in a director dramaturg from the beginning, because Crystal herself is a director. I thought this was her first big libretto, that I wanted her to have support because she's already a director, that she have a little bit of distance or somebody to like check things out with in a different way, because it was her first libretto, that she shouldn't be directing as she's writing and writing as she's directing. So we brought in Amy Hutchison, who was the person who directed the As One in Santa Barbara. So everybody knew each other, and the three of us spent some time together talking about the things that we believed would make this operatic and relevant and interesting for all kinds of audiences, and touch on these ethical subjects in a human way, but shed light on some of the contemporary issues that we're grappling with in our society, but not in a heavy-handed way. And then Amy and Crystal went off and had a retreat and started mapping out, who are our characters? How many singers are there? What are their roles? What is a reflection of the Antigone story? What's the conflict that brings these kids into a struggle with each other? How does that resolve? And they came up with this phenomenal story. And we went back and forth as the libretto was being written. Crystal would send drafts of each scene to me and to Amy, and we'd have meetings and talk about it and make changes and make challenges. It's like, that's not really clear, or we need a better motivation for that, or why would this person say that, and we kind of like played it out for, I guess, good part of a year. And then we had a reading with actors of the libretto, and it changes immediately when it's not in your head or yourself. When you sit back and like, oh, those are my characters, and I have to believe them, and I have to not like them, and I have to love them, and I have to, so we were able to fine tune that. And then Crystal sent in the final score, this final libretto, and I began to write the score. We made decisions together about what the instrumentation would be. I had a concept of the sound world I wanted, and I shared it with them, and we all talked it through, and that all got approved by the partners who were in the commission. And I started composing, and as I finished a fragment that was significant enough that Crystal and Amy could get a sense of it, I'd send them horrible digital files of it, so they could get a sense of the energy and the flow and the sound world. And as they questioned certain things, the libretto would change and the music would change. And then finally we got together, and we workshopped. It was about 2/3 composed at the time of the workshop, partially because I had two operas due at the same time, and I didn't think I could finish it all for the workshop, but also the workshop was very compressed. And it felt more important that we'd spend more time in more depth with a little bit less, which would reveal what needed to come, than do a more superficial version of the whole thing and not really get a sense of the dramatic arc. And the workshop was really great. And as a result, I was able to finish the last 25% and send it in a little bit ahead of schedule.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys had like a really getting to see the energy in the room and stuff. Just it sounds like you, Crystal, and Amy like were just a great team. And it sounds like you guys could like bounce off each other's energy really well and just, create something that sounds like, I mean, I only got to see a little bit of it, like you were saying, and it sounds like it's gonna be something that's really powerful and special and things that people need to hear, especially in this climate and this day and age. So that's amazing. Did you have any, like, when you were composing the piece, did you have any sort of inspirations as to where you wanted to go with it? Or it kind of just like what you were saying of like when you would bounce off with Crystal and Amy, you found where to go, or just,
I mean, I mean, that's a great question. I think that the thing that was important was that all of the characters, and there's primary roles, and then there's a chorus of kids in the drama club who are also just kids in the school, so they're hanging out and they sometimes participate as students. And then there's the role of the teacher who's sort of giving these kids agency. Go and put the show on by yourself, but keeps, checking in at relevant moments. And as the story unfolds, provides some guidance to the kids that helps them take ownership. Like, wow, this story is relevant, and we have to think about our relationship to this poor colleague of ours, this new student, but also there's too many guns, and we're growing up in schools where we have active shooter drills as part of our education. This isn't good. There's too
yeah,
many guns. Like maybe telling the story of Antigone in our own words in a contemporary way will actually be empowering and will make a plea for, you know, curtailing all the access to guns in our society. So there's this implied, you know, it's not, as I said, it's not agitprop political piece, but this clearly has a political agenda, which is, and we're not preaching, we're just saying this isn't healthy.
yeah,
Kids should not grow up learning what to do when somebody's trying to kill them in a
yeah,
classroom.
yeah.
So, and that these young students realize, wait, we need to speak up. We have a voice, and the arts can heal, and the arts give us a voice. So there's
Mhm.
also a pro arts.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but to your question, I think my job was, after I knew who the primary characters were, I needed to find a way that they weren't just singing words, but that each one had their own kind of musical language in the way that they would speak, just like different personalities. So Tyson has a different kind of macho bravado energy, and Jose has this like kind of slightly seductive but very poetic energy. And Alona is at first she's the new girl, just non-communicative, and then she's impassioned. And Bailey is the sort of annoying cheerleader girl who bosses everyone around, and you kind of like her, but she drives you nuts. And then there's the wisdom of the teacher. And so I wanted each of those lead characters to have their own musical quality. And some of it was how I would set their words with the energy and the flow. And like, does one of them repeat themselves a lot? And does the other one always very quick? And, you know, but then the instruments that would support them, and what kind of flow there would be, and collection of instrumental sounds to propel and to round out each of those characters was my challenge. So many composers just set the words with melodic lines and a piano, but
Hmm.
I write for all the instruments from the beginning, because I really hear like that really is the saxophone. It's not the piano. And I
Hmm.
need to sort of see it on the page. And then I create a reduced version, which is just the piano. In this case, I insisted that we had the percussionist at the workshop, because there's some scenes where rhythm itself is what propels the momentum. And I mean, I use rhythm a lot. I lived in West Africa for a year and I studied drumming seriously. And then I lived in
Wow.
Eastern Europe and studied all those uneven, asymmetrical kinds of rhythms with Costis loves because of his Greek heritage. And so rhythm is a really important piece of how I create energy. And it's just really hard to have a rehearsal pianist trying to tap rhythms. So I said, please, can we just have the percussionist at the workshop? And it made a big difference. Um, so that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. No, when just like you said, when the percussionist came in to that workshop, it did really change the feeling because you kind of hear the like dramatic point or you hear like it just emphasizes the words and the meanings a lot more. So it was just really cool and just fascinating and to kind of wrap up, what are some like I know we've kind of touched on it, like the meaning and what people, what people are experiencing is tragedy in schools. What are like some important takeaways that you really want the audience to come away with when they get to see this show come together?
Well, first of all, I think I hope I'm speaking equally for Crystal, who created these characters and thought it through, and then for Amy, who will be directing it, that we're all unified in our beliefs around the storytelling. I think that what's really important is that these tragedies occur all too often, that gun violence and mental health issues and the fear that youth grow up with, all of this is bad. And so that's one clear piece of it, but also making art together is something that makes us better human beings, and it helps us understand each other and it gives us a voice. And when we share that, it makes other people reflect, and that the arts are critical to a civilized society. And the joy of those kids in our story figuring out how to collaborate and listen to each other and resolve difference despite having difference and having fear and having anger and all of that, that they, through the process of making art, they were able to come to a place of strength and opposition and unity and hope all at once.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so like especially in today's world is just like art connects us, art is expression, art is how we can find each other through differences like you're saying and I think that really came to light through seeing this workshop and this show and to touch on the arts just as a final little thing. I always like to ask people because I did theater and stuff, but I am more, I didn't grow up in this specific like the composing side or the musical side. So what is advice that you would give someone that, wants to go down this field and is interested in composing or like working in starting an opera or creating a new piece or just any sort of information that you would give to someone that is interested?
Well, that's a gigantic question.
Yeah, it's a lot to say.
I think I just start and say that all of us are creative. Every human being, we all have that desire to make, and most human beings, and I will quote the Czech author Milan Kundera, who said, even in times of this is paraphrasing, even in times of greatest distress, human beings organize their lives according to the law of beauty. That we all seek beauty, and beauty brings us together, and we all can make something beautiful. Whether it's a wonderful meal that you make as a gift to your family and friends, or it's a painting, or it's, a sweater that you knit, it's about creating and sharing. And so everybody should try to find that place for themselves that gives them joy, whether it's flower arranging or baking the best chocolate chip cookies, but to do it in a spirit of openness and vulnerability and generosity, And then if you're going to be a composer or a ballet dancer or a bit professional soccer player, you have to work really hard and be very disciplined
Yes.
and know that you're not always going to win and sometimes it's going to hurt, but if you keep doing it with integrity, it's so worth it. It's like the
Yeah.
greatest joy.
Yeah. Oh, well, I love that. And this conversation has been so, I just feel like I've taken a lot of great things away from this, and I just really appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And it's just really cool to learn more about your work and hearing insights, and we really look forward to seeing Time to Act come to life, and I hope to get to see it when it premieres, and we're excited to keep up with you and see what you do next.
Great. Well, we can't wait to see its next production when it finally gets to Santa Barbara. So
Yeah.